Story time of how I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. His family loved me and my family loved him and they expected us to get married. Well, last year when COVID started, we were actually in different countries, so we didn't see each other for 3 months. During those 3 months, we FaceTimed 4 times a day, and we were always texting. He happened to be quarantining in our hometown, so both of our families were in the same place. I was quarantined in a different country. One day my cousin calls me and tells me that she met a really nice guy on a dating website. I was so happy for her because she had had bad luck with guys. Every single week, her and I would catch up on the phone and she would tell me how much she liked this guy, and how amazing their dates were, and how amazing he was in bed, how sweet and considerate he was. I couldn't be happier for her. Well, when I finally get back home, my boyfriend is super distant and cold. So naturally, I called my cousin and complained. She told me to give him space. She said I should just leave him alone. And so like an idiot, I did leave him alone. One day my cousin calls me and tells me to come over for dinner. When I got there, my boyfriend's car was parked in her garage. I thought it was just her nice way of trying to get us to talk. I walk in and catch them doing the dirty on the couch. Come back for part 2. So I walk in on my cousin and my boyfriend doing the dirty on her couch. They quickly get up from the couch and get dressed. Of course, by that time, I'm in hysterics. I'm crying and yelling. My boyfriend instantly got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness. I went up to my cousin and I punched her right in the face. She wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, this is the guy that you've been dating, isn't it? She said yes, and that she was just trying to find the best way to tell me. And so she just thought the best way to tell me was to get me to walk in on her and him doing the dirty. I punched her again. My boyfriend came to her rescue though. Instantly went into hero mode, which made me even angrier, so I punched him too. I stormed out of her house and went back to my house. Well, I told my parents everything. And my dad went over to my uncle's house, my cousin's dad, and he told him everything. She was about to turn 19, so he took away her phone and her car. And I get a phone call from my ex, come back for Part 3. So my lying, cheating ex calls me and explains to me why he actually slept with my cousin. He said that he was so lonely and that he didn't know what to do, and that the closest thing to me he could find was my cousin. Right, as if that was any comfort to me. He said I should be grateful that I didn't cheat with someone else. I told him he had totally betrayed my trust and that I could never ever trust him again. And then he confessed that she was pregnant and that his parents wanted them to get married. He said he just wanted to give me a heads up. Then he said that we could still be together but just not tell anyone, so basically he wanted me to be his side piece. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was like I didn't know this man. Guess what I did? I recorded the entire conversation. So I went straight to my cousin and I let her listen to it. She was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he would offer to have me as a side chick. Well, I also let my uncle listen to it. He went to my ex's house and beat him up. Honestly, that made me sad, but he deserved it. They now have a baby and he's gained 50 pounds. Trust your instincts, girl, and always record your conversations. Also, how cute are my nails? Story time about how my boyfriend caught me with my sugar daddy. Quick disclaimer, this is not my story time and my eyes are red because I got sunscreen in them. So my boyfriend and I have been together for almost 4 years. The relationship itself is good, but the only problem is that he doesn't really pay for anything. I pay for the bills, almost all of the rent, and I even pay when we go on dates. I've always had a good job and he's always had like mediocre jobs here and there. I've always told him that I want him to get a better job and he says no because he's comfortable at the job that he's at. Meanwhile, I'm busting my butt and paying for everything. The only things that he pays for are when he goes out to eat by himself or if he's hanging out with his friends, or sometimes here and there he'll buy groceries, but it's really rare. So 2 years ago, I decided to find myself a sugar daddy. Number 1, I want the money, and number 2, I just want to feel taken care of. So I went through a few sugar daddies, and I didn't tell my boyfriend that I was actually doing this. Finally, I found myself the perfect sugar daddy. He gives me $5,000 a month and takes me out shopping whenever I want. We usually go out to fancy dinners, movies, things like that. Whenever I'm with my sugar daddy, I tell my boyfriend that I'm hanging out with friends. I was out with my sugar daddy one night and my boyfriend walks into the restaurant. Part 2 is up. I'm having dinner with my sugar daddy when my boyfriend walks into the restaurant. By the way, my sugar daddy did not know I had a boyfriend. As soon as I see my boyfriend walk in, I tell my sugar daddy that I have to go to the bathroom. I literally bolted to the bathroom. As I'm in the bathroom stall freaking out, my boyfriend calls me. So I answer the phone and he says, "Hey, are you at the restaurant? I swear to God, I just saw you run into the bathroom. Who's that guy with you at the table?" I was caught. I had no option but to be honest with my boyfriend. I tell him to come to the bathroom and he comes in and I explain to him that it is my sugar daddy. Then he stares at me for a few seconds and asks me, "How much money does he give you?" I decided to lie and I said 3,000 instead of the 5,000. And my boyfriend says, "Wow." And I'm like, "Aren't you mad?" And he said, "No, you're just gonna have to share now." Excuse me? Then I told him I didn't want to be in the relationship any longer because he's a man-child and I had to pay for everything. Begged me not to leave him and he said that he would get a better job. We're still in the bathroom at this point and my sugar daddy's waiting for me outside. Then my boyfriend says, "If you don't want me to go out there and tell him that you have a boyfriend, you better start giving me some of that money." I was shocked. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend threatened me and told me that if I didn't share the money, he would tell my sugar daddy that I had a boyfriend. I believed him. I went back to my sugar daddy's table and we basically had dinner with my boyfriend sitting across from us having dinner with his friends. The whole time I was trying to figure out how I would break up with my boyfriend without having to share the money that my sugar daddy gave me. I told my sugar daddy that I wasn't feeling well. He called me an Uber to take me back to my apartment. I got to my apartment and I started packing my stuff. Like, I knew my boyfriend was bad for making me pay for everything, but I didn't know he was that bad. Freaking threatened me. Then he starts calling my phone, sends a a text message and it says, "I'm gonna be home in 5 minutes." So I gathered all my things, ran downstairs, and waited behind the building for the Uber. And my boyfriend sees me, comes up to me and rips my bag away from me. Tried to get my phone, but I took it away from him. And he said that I had to share the money that my sugar daddy gave me. Finally, the Uber arrives and I jump in. My boyfriend actually pulled me by my hair to try to get me out of the car. I've blocked him and haven't spoken to him since, and I'm still with my sugar daddy.
Am I wrong for returning the shoes I got for my husband after he accused me of stealing from him? My 29, husband 36 is the breadwinner of the family. I stay home with the kids who are preschool age. He pays for the mortgage, bills, household needs, food, kids' needs, etc. He has set a monthly budget for each category and handles getting everything done. Recently, he has become overwhelmed and told me to handle grocery shopping, but before he let me, he asked me to write a list of all the stuff we need so he could calculate the total and also so he'd have an idea of how much I'll be spending when I take his credit card. I didn't have an issue with that because this way we'd watch our spending habits. However, he said I'm never allowed to get something that isn't on the list unless I'm paying for it some other way. Huh? On Friday, I was doing some grocery shopping as usual and saw that the store had some nice shoes on sale. The price was insanely low for this brand, and so I decided to grab a pair for my husband, thinking he'd be happy with them since he needed new sneakers anyway. I bought them, and when I showed them to him, he flipped out on me saying I made a huge mistake by buying something that wasn't on the list. I agreed with him, but I thought that since the shoes were for him, then it'd be different. He said I screwed up and shouldn't have bought those sneakers without telling him. To my defense, I said the price was so low, and it's not like I spent $100 on shoes. And also, I saw this as a great deal and wanted him to have those nice sneakers. He plainly said that what I did is considered stealing since he never consented to have those sneakers purchased and said that I'm being irresponsible with money. That is why I no longer have an income and my spending habits need a grip. We argued about it for hours and he avoided speaking to me for the rest of the day. The next day, I went and returned the sneakers and took the money back. He got home in the evening and lost it when he found out. He said he couldn't believe how petty and childish I was to actually do this. I explained that I was just correcting my mistake. He tried to contact the store and was told the sneakers were already sold. He got even angrier with me, but I told him that he accused me of stealing from him when I was just trying to do a nice gesture. He yelled that I had a lot of nerve calling what I did a nice gesture while using his money to do it. I told him he had no right to yell at me after I corrected my mistake and gave back the money he accused me of stealing. He threw a fit, then went out to his friends and came home late at night still not talking to me. So am I wrong here?
Story time about how my husband is threatening to cheat on me unless we have a 3-person sexy time, if you know what I mean. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me an Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. The first year we were together, we had kids. We have 2 kids now, and they are my priority. A year ago, my husband started complaining about how I don't pay any attention to him anymore. I started doing my best to try to give him more affection and just more time with me, but it's so hard with the kids. My husband does help me with the kids, but he works a lot and goes to the gym a lot. So when he's not home, it's basically my responsibility to do everything for the kids. They never tell you how hard it is to have kids and how hard it is to look after yourself and your relationship. I suggested we have date nights, but we still haven't gone on any. I told him that we should just go to the beach and hang out on our own, but he kept making up excuses. A month ago, he asked me if I would ever consider having a 3-person sexy time. I hope you understand what I mean. I told him I wouldn't be comfortable with that, and he said okay. A few days after that, he asked me again. This time I probed and asked him why he was saying that. That's when he confessed that the only way he can stay faithful is by inviting someone else into our bedroom. I was really heartbroken. I never expected him to say anything like that to me, so I just started to cry. Then he got angry because I started to cry and told me that he needs to have more fun in this relationship. I asked him if he had already cheated on me and he swore that he didn't. The kids were in the other bedroom, so I didn't want to start another argument. I let it go, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he had told me. That's when I got scared that he might actually cheat on me. I started becoming really insecure and he hated this. I started asking him almost on a daily basis if he had cheated on me. He kept denying it, so I believed him. A few days later, we got into a fight about the kids. Out of nowhere, he starts threatening to cheat on me unless we have a 3-person sexy time. This time, he wouldn't let it go. He told me he would find somebody to cheat on me with, but for me not to worry because it wouldn't mean anything to him. He was basically asking me for permission to have an affair. I felt hopeless, so I finally accepted his offer. That's when he got really excited and started showing me pictures of girls at the gym. He told me he'd been talking to a few already and that he could get one of the girls to come to our house that very same week. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my husband is threatening to cheat on me unless we have a 3-person sexy time. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me an Instagram. That's when he told me that he could have a girl come to our house this week. Felt like I had no choice but to accept because I didn't want him to cheat on me. Later that night, I asked him who he'd been talking to at the gym. He told me there were several girls at the gym that would flirt with him every single time, and that one of them had offered to come to our house. I couldn't get it out of my head that he had probably already cheated on me with one of these girls. I mean, why try to involve me when he could do it on his own with them? A few days later, he told me there was a girl that was willing to come over to our house on Friday. That's when my husband asked me to go get waxed and to go to the salon and do something to my hair. So I went to get waxed and got highlights at the salon. I won't lie, I actually felt really good after this. When my husband saw me later that night, he said I looked amazing. One thing about me, I've always been pretty athletic, and since having kids, my body has snapped back. I'm not very self-conscious about my body, but the thought of having someone else in our bedroom just made me feel gross. She finally arrived and I was expecting a young hot thing. This woman was in her 40s. She was 12 years older than me, and she was not in very good shape. By the way, we left the kids with a babysitter, so don't worry. We all went up to the bedroom, and my husband poured us glasses of wine. That's when my husband kissed the woman. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my husband is threatening to cheat on me unless we have a 3-person sexy time, if you know what I mean. Disclaimers on my story time. Send me on Instagram. The 3 of us were finally up in the bedroom. My husband leaned in to kiss her and they were making out for about 30 seconds. Right in front of me like I didn't even exist. That's when it hit me and I realized what we were about to do. I was in my own house, in my own bedroom with a random woman who was older than me, and no offense, I thought I was definitely more attractive. Finally, when they stopped kissing, I tell my husband I can't do this. That's when he gets really angry, grabs me by the arm and takes me into the hallway. He tells me if I don't do this then I should just leave the house because he's still gonna do it with her. And that from now on, he would be able to do whatever he wanted because I wasn't willing to cooperate. Thankfully, the woman came out of the bedroom and told my husband that it wasn't worth it if we were going to be arguing. He begged her not to leave. It was pathetic. But of course, she left anyway. That's when he grabs his things and tells me he's going to the gym. Cried for 3 hours and went to pick up the kids. When my husband got home, he apologized and told me that he probably overreacted. Probably? Then he starts begging me to please reconsider doing it again with the same woman. That's when I asked him if he had a thing for older women. I told him that I was much more attractive and younger than this other woman, so why did he want her? Then he confessed that his thing is older women. Then he asked me what was the oldest I would be willing to go. I told him I didn't know if I even wanted to do it with someone else. That's when he started threatening again. He said he'd go do it either way and that I would just have to deal with it. That's when I told him that maybe we should just consider getting a divorce. He got so angry he smashed a glass on the countertop. After I let him calm down, I asked him if he'd already been having an affair with that woman. He keeps denying it, but something's telling me he already did it. Told me he wouldn't give me the divorce because he loves me. But he's also saying he's gonna cheat on me. I'm seriously considering inviting the woman back over just to please my husband. I know that's just gonna lead to bad things. I asked my best friend and she told me to just go through with it. And that if I have to save my marriage by having other people in my bed, then I should just do it. But I just can't bring myself to saying yes. I told my mom and she told me to get a divorce no matter what. She guarantees that he's already cheated. Should I say yes or should I leave him? Storytime about how my husband hired a really hot assistant and now I want him to fire her, but he won't. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. Now, I've never suspected him of cheating, but I have caught him lying to me a few times. A few years back, I checked his Facebook Messenger and caught him messaging another girl. The messages weren't exactly inappropriate, but they were definitely flirty. When I asked him if he was messaging anyone on Facebook, he denied it. That's when I unleashed the beast and told him that I had seen the messages. That's when he told me that he wanted to break up because he didn't want to stop messaging her. This was some random girl that he had met at his job. We actually did break up for a few days, but then he literally begged me on his knees to stay with him. Then I caught him lying a second time. He told me he was going out to dinner with a friend of his who I already knew, and it was a woman. I had no problem with him going out to dinner with her because we already knew each other from a few years back. At the time, I was away for work. After 8 hours, he still hadn't messaged me. I decided to call him, but he didn't answer. That's when I tracked his location and realized that he was somewhere in the city. He finally messaged me telling me that he was home and he was trying to get to sleep. I took a screenshot of his location and sent it to him. Then he called me begging me for forgiveness. He told me he thought I'd probably get jealous if he knew that he was still with her. Obviously, I wasn't gonna get jealous. It was just more upsetting that he lied to me. All of that was a few years ago. Since then, he's always been on his best behavior. About a year ago, my husband started a new company and it's been very successful. So successful that he's hired a full staff. Up until now, all of them have been men. But about a week ago, he told me he needed an assistant. That's when I told him I knew a friend of mine who needed a job. This woman is much older than us and would never be interested in my husband. But my husband told me that he was looking for somebody younger and someone that was interested in the field of work. A few days after that, he had finally hired somebody. I didn't really think anything of it though. By the way, I work in financing, so I'm usually working from home. My husband and I usually meet up for lunch, so I decided to go pick him up from work. But when I got there, a young hot girl asked me if I had an appointment to see my own husband. I told her I was the owner's wife and she laughed it off. She then apologized really quickly but didn't really mean it. Let me tell you how this girl was dressed. She wore a crop top and super tight leggings. She also had a full face of makeup on and her hair was freshly curled. It looked like she was dressed to go to a club, or at least trying to impress someone. Part 2 is up. Part 2, am I the asshole for wanting my husband to fire his hot assistant? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. After I told her I was the owner's wife, she made sure to stand up and show off her body to me. That's when I saw how tight all her clothes were. She then waltzed into my husband's office and tells him that I'm there. My husband quickly came out, almost running, and I asked him if everything was okay. That's when he said, yes, I just wanted to introduce you to my new assistant. Her name is Anna. Anna and I shook hands and I could feel that her palms were sweaty. That's when I knew something was up. My husband told her that she could leave for the day since he was going to be gone for a few hours. And guess what? She insisted on staying until he got back. And it's like she was doing it all because I was there. When my husband and I finally got into the car, I told him that I wanted him to fire her. He started to laugh and ask me why. I told him that the way she was dressed was incredibly inappropriate and that it looked like she was about to go party with all the makeup and hair that she had on. And of course, he told me I was overreacting and that he wouldn't fire her. Then he kissed me and reassured me that he wasn't even attracted to her. I asked him why he hired her and he told me that she was really smart and fast. Then I told him that if he didn't fire her, that him and I would have problems. He got in a bad mood for the rest of the day. Part 3 is up. Part 3, am I the asshole for wanting my husband to fire his hot assistant? Disclaimer, is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. After the second time I told him to fire her, he once again said no and got in a really bad mood for the rest of the day. That's when I told him that it was clear that she had a thing for him, and that she was obviously dressing up and putting on all that makeup and hair just for him. He told me that she had a boyfriend and that she wasn't interested in him like that. But I don't believe it at all. You know, women's intuition? From the moment I met her, I got the feeling she was trying to show off her body, and her palms were sweaty as in she was nervous. That's when I decided I would go to my husband's office every single day. And guess what? I decided to dress up too. I put on a sexy outfit to pick up my husband the following day, and she was dressed in the exact same way. Super tight leggings, crop top, and showing off cleavage. Her hair and makeup were done again. As soon as she saw me coming into the office, she gave me a really dirty look. I asked her if anything was wrong, and she said no. I couldn't help myself, and I told her that the way she looked at me was weird. Then she apologized and told me that she didn't mean anything by it. My husband came out of his office and told me that Anna, his assistant, had already brought him lunch and that he didn't need to go to lunch with me. I was furious. I gave my husband a kiss and went home. I insisted once again that he needed to fire her later, and he said no. So guess what I did? I got myself a really hot personal trainer. Of course, my husband got really jealous. I told him that I wouldn't stop working out with him until he fires his assistant. He thinks I'm being terrible for wanting him to fire her, but I don't trust that girl one bit. And I can't say I trust my husband 100%. Am I the asshole? Anyway, my trainer has been flirting with me hardcore. I'm planning on making my husband as jealous as possible. Bye.
Storytime of my traumatic BBL surgery and why I believe no one should get them. So around the time I was 18, I just graduated high school. I've always been very insecure about my body. I used to get teased because of it. My legs were like pencil thin and my stomach was like a balloon. I tried working out and building glutes, but they would never grow and my stubborn stomach fat wouldn't move. So for the rest of the year, I saved up and started searching for the cheapest doctors because I couldn't afford to get a BBL. So I came across this one website and the doctor was in Turkey. He did BBLs for as little as $3,000. So I asked my friend if she could come and I scheduled an appointment a few months later. Went through a consultation and all that. As the time get closer, I started to do my research and there's not many reviews, which should have been a red flag. When the time comes, we fly out, go to the office. The building said university and it almost looked like a school. I asked the receptionist about it and she said it was for doctors in training, which was an even bigger red flag, which I'll get into in part 2. Part 2 of my traumatic BBL surgery and why I believe no one should get them. I arrived, got prepped for surgery, they started marking me up so I know where the fat was being transferred. While they're doing this, there's students coming in watching, which by the way, they never informed me of. And at the time, I thought, well, that's what's supposed to happen, and I never said anything. A couple minutes later, I go through with the surgery. After coming out is when I started regretting it. In the beginning, my body was exactly what I wanted it to be with the faja. But without it, my stomach looked wrinkly and my butt had dimples. I was scared, so I called to see what was wrong. They said after surgery, I was supposed to hire a person to do lymphatic massages on me. They never talked to me about it, but they said they put it inside of my discharge papers. I couldn't find one, so they recommended me to a person that did them for cheap. Reason being because she was a student and they never told me that. The massage was painful, which I expected. I got 5 massages before I left. When I got to the airport with my friend, as soon as I walked on a plane, I passed out, and I'll get Part 3 of my traumatic BBL surgery and why I believe no one else should get them. After passing out at the airport, me and my friend were held back to wait 12 hours for the next flight. Luckily, we didn't have to pay, but we had to make multiple stops and sit next to strangers. I was in extreme pain even after taking the medication. When I got back home, I noticed my stomach was still wrinkly and my butt was pointy. I called my surgeon about it and he said it was because I wasn't getting enough massages. So I scheduled for multiple massages, more than what I really needed. The massages turned out to be more expensive than the actual BBL. After 3 months, my body still looked disformed. I cried about it and I constantly would call the surgeons just about every week. And I believe they got annoyed because they stopped answering all my calls. And I started to reach out to them through blocked numbers. After doing more research, I found out my doctor was still a student. No one was fully certified. In the time frame I got my surgery, the facility was getting sued for someone else who got a botched surgery. If you ever get a BBL, please do your research.
Am I the asshole for stealing $10,000 from my best friend? So back in 2020, when the pandemic started, my best friend had got laid off from her job. Me, I kind of already worked from home, so as far as working, I never got laid off. Since she was out of work, she was trying to find new ways of making income, and one of them was starting a business. She wanted to start a nail business, which, by the way, this girl could not do nails. And this is no way to bash my friend. She just didn't have the patience to even do her own nails. It took her maybe like 3 months to develop her business, but once she had got it running, she started making a lot of money. And I was happy for her. But I was confused on how she was making money because I've never seen her, do anyone's nails. She said in order for me to understand her business, she's not going to give the ins and outs unless I were to join her. And I was like, cool, I guess we both can make money, which I'll explain in part 2. Part 2 of me stealing $10,000 from my best friend. So I joined her business. Mind you, I didn't know exactly what it was about. I just knew it had something to do with nails, and she made little small posts of nails. When I went to her house and saw her bedroom, she had a lot of press-on nails all over the place. So I was like, oh, she's selling press-on nails. That explains. She told me where she had got everything from, how she markets herself, just explains everything to me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really great of what you done. I had asked her, how do I get started on? She was like, this business that she has started is a 6-figure business monthly, and that I would need to invest $10,000 into her business. And I was like, whoa, because $10,000 is what I've had saved up. But she had promised that she was making that amount of money, and she showed me her accounts. She literally said, girl, you can have $100K in your bank by next month. So of course I joined on, and I explained how she tricked me in part 3. Part 3 on how I stole $10,000 from my best friend. So after a month within joining, she said I would have to pay for some of the stock, which was okay, the marketing, the websites, and I also had to help her run, the pages for her business. Well, our business now. I remember when I first had joined on, she was saying the business is going to be slow for just a few weeks. And, I trusted her because that was my girl. And every month, I just was still investing into her ads, still investing into promotion. On top of the $10,000, I was still investing more and more money. Give or take, literally after 6 months, we weren't gaining barely any sales. And she said that she wanted me out of the business because she felt like I wasn't doing much. Mind you, I invested majority of the money. During the process of her wanting to kick me off, I begged her to keep me to stay. Black Friday and Christmas came up, and we started to get a whole bunch of sales, and we made a give or take over $30,000. Knowing that she wanted me to leave, I transferred the money from our business account to my account.
Storytime on how my homophobic boyfriend turned out to be actually gay. So my sophomore year of college is actually when I met my boyfriend, which, by the way, we're calling Justin. Justin had just transferred over, and he was a junior. And before anyone comes at me for me being with a homophobic, well, at the time, I didn't know he was, and I didn't exactly know what homophobic was. But anyway, back to our relationship, I met him at a Greek party. We talked, swapped numbers, and then the rest was history. Well, history for the next couple months. I would notice little small things in our relationship, like he never liked any of the guy friends I had, specifically the gay friends I had. He always had something to say about them regarding their sexuality. Not even that. There were times about how he would just randomly talk about how gay people are disgusting. And there was one time at this party where he got into a fight with one of my friends, who was, by the way, gay. And this is when I found out he was gay. I'm gonna come back for part 2. Part 2 on how I found out my homophobic boyfriend was gay. So, like I said, we were at a party, and he got into it with one of my friends. Now, the whole situation started is when my friend wanted to go get me a drink. And by the way, we all came to the party together, and my boyfriend didn't like that. He said that he would get it. My friend was like, no, it's cool, I got it. And then they just started bickering back and forth. Of course, my boyfriend was like, oh, you're not her man, you're a sissy, you're that, da-da-da-da-da. Just going off on him. And I was telling him to calm down, it's not that serious. And my friend left the area where we went to get himself a drink, came back, and threw the drink on my boyfriend. And I was so confused because I thought he was trying to leave the situation alone. And my boyfriend got up and just immediately started going in on him. So they got into it, and my best friend was beat up real bad. When I got up and, tried to clean him off, my friend was like, oh, you need to go talk to your boyfriend about what happened last night. And I'm like, last night? Y'all come back for Part 3 on how I found out my homophobic boyfriend was gay. So after their fight or whatever, my friend was messed up real bad. I picked him up, try to help him out. And of course, I was upset about the whole situation. But my boyfriend really, blacked out on him, which I thought was, unnecessary. Anyways, my friend was really frustrated, was really irritated. And literally out of nowhere, he was like, tell her about last night. And I'm like, what happened last night? He was like, oh, since you want to talk about me being gay, talk about what you do. And I'm looking at him like, what? In my head, I'm still not thinking he's gay. I'm thinking maybe he cheated on me with some girl. But regardless, I still would be upset. And my friend was like, I'm sorry to tell you, but he was with me last night. And I'm looking and I'm like chuckling a little bit like, wait, huh? He's saying after the little arguments that we've been having in our relationship that he would go to my friend's dorm room and they would be messing around. And my boyfriend, of course, the entire time, he's like, that's not true. He's lying. You gonna trust a sissy boy? Just story time on why I don't trust male doctors, specifically the ones that work with the female body. So the summer of 2020, a couple days before my sister's birthday trip to Miami, this might be TMI, but my vajayjay was tingling. It felt weird, but I ignored it. The next day, it was so painful that I couldn't even sit down. But I assumed that it was an ingrown hair because I would get them time to time. Anyways, later that night, I met up with my boyfriend to go to his house. As we were walking, he noticed that I was limping. I, of course, told him my whole situation about what was going on down there. He said, the pain is hurting to the point where you're limping. You should head to the hospital. So we went to the hospital immediately so I could find out what was going on. So we went to the hospital immediately so we could find out what was going on. And there were times of that night my boyfriend assumed that I had some type of STD, which wasn't the case. When the first doctor saw me and checked me out, they were so confused what was going on, so they brought in a different doctor. And I'll get into what exactly that doctor did to my body in part 2. Part 2 on why I do not trust male doctors, specifically the ones that work with the female body. So the second doctor came in and he told me to open up my legs. And this man immediately took 3 fingers and shoved it in. When I tell you that was the most painful experience I've ever had in my life, it was so painful. More painful than childbirth. He was twisting his fingers as though he was looking for something. He couldn't tell me exactly what it was, but he said that I should be fine. Maybe 5 minutes later, a nurse came in. She said the doctor said that I had lymph nodes. And they prescribed me with 3 different drugs. And they put a shot in my butt. If you have the option to get in your arm, get it in your arm. When I got done, I went back home, started taking the drugs. The drugs made me feel really sick. I was shaky, fatigued, getting heat flashes, nausea, and my heart was racing super fast. And still with the drugs, the pain was not going away. A few days later, I went back to the hospital because the drugs just weren't working. And when I got checked out, I was diagnosed with something completely different than what I was told, which I will be getting into in part 3. Part 3 on why I do not trust male doctors, specifically the ones that work with female bodies. So like I said, I went back to the ER and was diagnosed with something completely different. So all the prescriptions that the doctors had me taking were the wrong drugs. So the process of me being in the hospital, a different doctor had checked me out. When I told the other doctor what I had, or what I was told by their other doctor, he was like, lymph nodes? Who told you that? I said, one of your doctors, and he gasped. And he told me that I had a Bartholone cyst. He said he could drain it, but there's a risk of it coming back, and it did. And I told him, please drain it because it was very painful. The first step to draining it was numbing it, and he had to prick my vajayjay 10 times with the needle, which was also painful. Then he had to make a cut to drain it. At that point, I was about to pass out because I could literally feel everything. The numbing was not working. Plus, I was extremely embarrassed because there were like 5 other men with my legs busted open. And I cried the entire process. No one asked if I was okay. They rushed the whole process. Hey guys, I'm finally back with another story time. I've been on hiatus because I recently moved. Now that I'm settled, I'm posting story times every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. And if you're interested in sending an anonymous story time, definitely go check out my Instagram and DM me. Now let's get into the long-awaited story. This story time is how my psycho ex-best friend almost put my boyfriend in jail. We were friends for 6 years and things took a turn the last 2 years. Whenever she had problems, I listened to her, give her advice. But whenever I vented to her, I was ignored and the conversation was dry if we weren't speaking about her. After a while, I distanced myself and became friends with my now boyfriend. I started hanging out with him more and she started to get really jealous. She tried to get me to break up with him, saying he was ugly and broke. When I finally got to my breaking point of cutting her off, I went to her personally and tried to cut off our friendship. We were arguing, going back and forth. Towards the end of our conversation, she yelled and said, my boyfriend forced himself on her. Let me know if you guys want a part 2. Part 2 on how my psycho ex-best friend almost put my boyfriend in jail. So me and her was arguing, and I was seriously trying to end our relationship because it was really toxic. Towards the end of our conversation, she yelled at me saying that my boyfriend forced himself onto her. I was so confused on how to react. Even though she was crazy, this was my best friend for 6 years, and I met my boyfriend maybe a couple months ago, and she has never said anything like this to me before. And I started thinking, maybe the reason why she hated our relationship is because of what he did to her. So of course, I immediately ended our relationship, and also because she asked me if I could cut him off completely, and I did. A few days later, I asked her if she ever wanted to fill out a police report or tell her parents. She said she was embarrassed and wasn't ready to come out. 2 weeks later, my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, pulled up at my house asking me why did I end the relationship. He came to me crying, and I told him what she told me. He claimed that he barely has even spoken to the girl. The entire situation was really nasty, and at this point, I really didn't know who to believe, so I confronted her about it, which I'll get into in part 3. Part 3 on how my psycho ex-best friend almost put my boyfriend in jail. So I went ahead and went to my best friend's house and told her what he told me. She said that he was lying and he was just trying to separate us. She even told me to call the cops if he ever popped up at my house like that ever again. And I'm like, yeah, she's right. He should never popped up like that. But he was blocked, so he really had no other way of communicating with me. Anyway, over time, I kept asking her if she ever wanted to go to her parents about it or take legal action. And she would always say that she wasn't ready and wasn't comfortable. And of course, I had to understand that because those type of situations are really traumatic. I don't know, maybe a year after the situation, her attitude hasn't really changed. She was still the same psycho, crazy, and manipulative friend. I don't know, I think over time I just started to get tired of her, even after what happened to her. A couple months later, I still asked her again if she ever wanted to press charges. I think she got fed up with me asking, and she told me that the whole thing was a prank. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. She was like, yes, it was a prank, and the prank is over now, and it doesn't matter anymore. I blacked out. This story time is from a follower, and she really needs advice. By the way, we're going to call her Kalia. So Kalia's baby daddy had got her pregnant when she was 15, and now she's currently 16. She said they have a toxic cycle where they get very nasty with each other. Then they be okay for a few days. But it just seems like every single day they argue. So normal as everything is okay. It seems like every time they argue, he pinpoints her physical appearance. And that takes a toll on her on how she perceives her own body. There were times where she tried to talk to him about her feelings, but he would just get really mad and leave because he supposedly has a short temper. And he's also very manipulative towards her. She said she thinks about leaving, but she's scared because she has a baby with this man. Well, this boy, there's a daily cycle of him breaking up with her every day. She feels like this relationship has been really draining. There are times where the relationship was physically. She wants to remain anonymous, so please down below drop down some advice.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open. She's like, I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either. Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, you ever see any ghosts walking around your attic? Her face got completely serious, and she's like, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated, and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
Can you solve this mystery? This is a story about a young girl whose brother confessed to killing their parents, but things are not as they seem. All the clues to what really happened are hidden in what I'm about to say. So one day, this young girl decided to tell her friend about the terrible tragedy. Her friend asked about what happened to her brother after the confession. She said he got arrested, went to trial, and eventually was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection. During the execution, her brother never said a word. He gave no explanation and just stared at her blankly as they gave him the injection. The young girl admitted after that she couldn't eat or sleep. She had so many questions, but no one left to give her answers. She tried to block out the terrible memories and suffered from depression and even amnesia. The friend suggested she go to a psychic to find some answers, so she did. She asked, "What drove my brother to lose his mind?" And the psychic said, "Your brother was always perfectly sane." The girl asked, "So then why did my brother kill our parents?" And the psychic said, "Your brother was only responsible for the death of one person." Suddenly, the girl understood everything. She broke down crying. What really happened to this family? Can you solve this mystery? This is why you should never eat chicken for dinner. One night, a young couple got invited to a party, so they called their neighbor to babysit their newborn son. But they could have never expected the horrifying things this would lead to. Their neighbor was an old woman, and the couple needed her to put their baby to bed and put a chicken in the oven so it would be cooked for tomorrow's dinner. The old woman agreed, and the couple left for the night. But soon, the mother felt like she needed to call and check in. The old woman answered the phone, and the mother asked if she put the baby to bed yet. "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot all about it. I'll do it now," the old woman said. "And have you put the chicken in the oven?" the mother asked. "I'm sorry, I forgot about that too. I'll do it now," said the old woman. The mother just rolled her eyes and hung up. She thought she couldn't complain because her neighbor was helping her out anyways. It wasn't until the couple got home that they realized what a horrifying mistake they made. They thanked the old woman for helping out, and the mother went upstairs to check on her baby. When she walked into her son's bedroom, she was shocked to see an uncooked chicken in the crib. But what happened next was even more terrifying. Downstairs, she heard her husband say, "You won't believe this, honey. That forgetful neighbor burned our chicken dinner."